Chapter 1. Love is the Foundation. Brad and Emily couldn't figure out what was wrong with Caleb, their 8-year-old son. He had been an above-average learner and still did his homework, but this year he was struggling in school. He would go to the teacher after she had given an exercise and ask her to explain it again. He'd visit her desk up to 8 times a day, asking for further instructions. Was it poor hearing or a comprehension problem? Brad and Emily had Caleb's hearing tested, and a school counselor gave him a comprehension test. His hearing was normal, and his understanding typical for a 3rd grader. Other things about their son puzzled them. At times, Caleb's behavior seemed almost antisocial. The teacher would take turns eating with her 3rd grade students during lunch, but Caleb would sometimes push other children aside so he could be near her. During recess, he would leave other children whenever the teacher appeared on the playground, running to her to ask an insignificant question and escape the others. If the teacher participated in a game during recess, Caleb would try to hold the teacher's hand during the game. His parents had met with the teacher 3 times already, and neither they nor the teacher could find the problem. Independent and happy in grades 1 and 2, Caleb now seemed to show clinging behavior that made no sense. He also was fighting much more with his older sister, Hannah, although Emily and Brad assumed that was just a stage he was passing through. When this couple came to my The Marriage You've Always Wanted seminar and told me about Caleb, they were worried, wondering if they had a budding rebel on their hands, or maybe a kid with psychological problems. Dr. Chapman, we know this is a marriage seminar, and maybe our question is out of place, Emily said, but Brad and I thought that perhaps you could give us some guidance. Then she described her son's worrisome behavior. I asked these parents whether their own lifestyle had changed this year. Brad said he was a salesman, out on calls 2 nights a week, but home between 6 and 7:30 p.m. on the other weeknights. Those nights were spent catching up on emails and texts and watching a little TV. On weekends, he used to go to football games, often taking Caleb, but he hadn't done that in a year. It's just too much of a hassle. I'd rather watch the games on TV. How about you, Emily? I asked. Have there been any changes in your lifestyle over the last few months? Definitely, she said. I've been working part-time at the college for the last 3 years since Caleb entered kindergarten, but this year I took a full-time job there, so I get home later than usual. Actually, my mom picks him up at school, and Caleb stays with her for about an hour and a half until I pick him up. On the evenings that Brad is out of town, Caleb and I usually have dinner with my folks and then come home. It was almost time for the seminar session to begin, yet I sensed I was beginning to understand what was going on inside of Caleb. So I made a suggestion. I'm going to be talking about marriage, but I want each of you to be thinking about how the principles I am sharing might apply to your relationship with Caleb. At the end of the seminar, I'd like to know what conclusions you've drawn. They seemed a little surprised that I was ending our conversation without making any suggestions, but they both were willing to go along with my request. At the end of the day, as other participants at our seminar were filing out, Brad and Emily hurried up to me with that look of fresh discovery. Dr. Chapman, I think we've just gained some insight into what's going on with Caleb, Emily said. When you were discussing the 5 love languages, we both agreed that Caleb's primary love language is quality time. Looking back over the last 4 or 5 months, we realized that we have given him less quality time than we had before. When I was working part-time, I'd pick him up from school every day, and we would usually do something together on the way home, maybe run an errand or stop by the park or get ice cream together. When we got home, Caleb would play games on his tablet for a while. Then after dinner, I would often help him with his homework, or we'd watch something on Netflix, especially on the nights Brad was away. All that has changed since I started my new job, and I realize I'm spending less time with Caleb. I glanced at Brad, and he said, For my part, I realize I used to take Caleb with me to football games, but since I stopped going, I haven't replaced that father-son time with anything. He and I haven't really spent a great deal of time together the last few months. I need to think about ways I can check in with him when I'm traveling, too. I think you may have discovered some real insight into Caleb's emotional need, I told them. If you can meet his need for love, I think there is a good chance you will see a change in his behavior. I suggested some key ways to express love through quality time and challenged Brad to build time with Caleb into his schedule, even long-distance time. I encouraged Emily to look for ways she and Caleb could once more do some of the things they did before she started her full-time job. They both seemed eager to translate their insight into action. There may be other factors involved, I said, but if you will give your son large doses of quality time and then sprinkle in the other 4 love languages, I think you will see a radical change in his behavior. We said goodbye. I never heard from Emily and Brad, and to be honest, I forgot about them. But about 2 years later, I returned to Wisconsin for another seminar, and they walked in and reminded me of our conversation. They were all smiles. We hugged each other, and they introduced me to friends they had invited to the seminar. "Tell me about Caleb," I said. They both smiled and said, "He's doing great. We meant to write you many times, but never got around to it. We went home and did what you suggested. We consciously gave Caleb lots of quality time over the next few months. Within 2 or 3 weeks, really, we saw a dramatic change in his behavior at school. In fact, the teacher asked us to come in again, and we were worried. But this time, she wanted to ask what we had done that had brought about such a change in Caleb. The teacher told them that Caleb's inappropriate behavior had stopped. No more pushing other children away from her in the lunchroom. No more coming to her desk to ask question after question. Then Emily explained that her husband and she had begun to speak Caleb's love language after attending a seminar. We told her how we had started giving him overdoses of quality time, said Emily. This couple had learned to speak their son's love language, to say, "I love you," in a way that Caleb could understand. His story encouraged me to write this book. Speaking your child's primary love language does not mean he or she will not rebel later. It does mean your child will know you love him, and that can bring him security and hope. It can help you to rear your child to responsible adulthood. Love is the foundation. In raising children, everything depends on the love relationship between the parent and the child. Nothing works well if a child's love needs are not met. Only the child who feels genuinely loved and cared for can do her best. You may truly love your child, but unless she feels it, unless you speak the love language that communicates to her your love, she will not feel loved. Filling the emotional tank. By speaking your child's own love language, you can fill his emotional tank with love. When your child feels loved, he is much easier to discipline and train than when his emotional tank is running near empty. Every child has an emotional tank, a place of emotional strength that can fuel him through the challenging days of childhood and adolescence. Just as cars are powered by reserves in the gas tank, our children are fueled from their emotional tanks. We must fill our children's emotional tanks for them to operate as they should and reach their potential. But with what do we fill these tanks? Love, of course, but love of a particular kind that will enable our children to grow and function properly. We need to fill our children's emotional tanks with unconditional love, because real love is always unconditional. Unconditional love is a full love that accepts and affirms a child for who he is, not for what he does. No matter what he does or does not do, the parent still loves him. Sadly, some parents display a love that is conditional. It depends on something other than their children just being. Conditional love is based on performance and is often associated with training techniques that offer gifts, rewards, and privileges to children who behave or perform in desired ways. Of course, it is necessary to train and discipline our children, but only after their emotional tanks have been filled and refilled. They can deplete regularly. Only unconditional love can prevent problems such as resentment, feelings of being unloved, guilt, fear, and insecurity. Only as we give our children unconditional love will we be able to deeply understand them and deal with their behaviors, whether good or bad. Anna remembers growing up in a home of modest financial resources. Her father was employed at a plant nearby, and her mother was a homemaker, except for occasionally working at Target. Both parents were hard-working people who took pride in their house and family. Anna helped her mom cook the evening meal, and later she, her dad, and brothers would pitch in on cleanup and then watch some TV. Saturday was a day for weekly chores and the occasional youth soccer game, and Saturday nights they sent out for pizza. On Sunday mornings, the family went to church, and that evening they would spend time with relatives. When Anna and her brothers were younger, their parents would listen to them practice their reading almost every night. They always encouraged them in their studies because they wanted all three children to attend college, even though they did not have this opportunity themselves. In middle school, Anna spent a lot of time with Sophia. The two had most classes together, often shared lunch, texted one another. But the girls didn't visit each other at home. If they had, they would have seen vast differences. Sophia's father was a successful executive who was away from home most of the time. Sophia's mother was a doctor with a busy practice. An older sister was out of college and living out of state. The family did take vacations to places like London and L.A., which Sophia loved. Her mother did her best to make time for her younger daughter and understood the dangers of lavishing her with things rather than simple attention. The girls were good friends until 9th grade, when Sophia went off to a college prep school near her grandparents. The first year, the girls kept in touch on social media. After that, Sophia began dating and communicated less. Anna got busy with her studies and other friendships. After Sophia's family moved away, Anna never heard from her again. If she had, she would have been sad to know that after marrying and having one child, Sophia struggled with alcoholism and the breakup of her marriage. In contrast, Anna was in grad school studying advanced biology. What made the difference in the outcome of two childhood friends? Although there is no one answer, we can see part of the reason in what Sophia once told her therapist. I never felt loved by my parents. I first got involved in drinking because I wanted my friends to like me. In saying this, she wasn't trying to lay blame on her parents as much as she was trying to understand herself. Did you notice what Sophia said? It wasn't that her parents didn't love her, but that she did not feel loved. Most parents love their children and also want their children to feel loved. But few know how to adequately convey that feeling. It is only as they learn how to love unconditionally that they will let their children know how much they are truly loved.